Uh, yeah. Another reason to call was that I'm gonna go on a Goenka retreat over 3 days or so. I wanted to just check in with you,
You're
how
about to go on a retreat in 3 days that lasts how long?
10 days. It's one of the
Okay.
Goenka 10-day retreats.
All right.
To,
Where is that going to be held?
it's in a little village called Stockholm in Belgium, so I can basically cycle there from here in Maastricht.
Hmm. Okay. Well, good luck on that. So for right now, let's talk about um, you're using the word insecurity.
Hmm.
That 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 feeling. Here's an example. The color green. When you think of the color green, you probably think of a different color green than I think of. And in fact, I may think of more than one color green when I think of green. This is what language does for us.
Right.
And so um, using that as an example, uh, there are a lot of different words for the same or similar feeling, and that everybody has kind of their own word for it. And that one of the words for that feeling of insecurity can also be thought of as anxiety,
Mhm.
um, or a general feeling of uh, unwell being, or the need to get something done, or uh, achieve some goal, or whatever like that is what people generally put on it, rather than working on that feeling directly. Now, for me, it had a whole lot to do with, let us say, at least in the origins of it, was in driving motorcycles when I was a teen and later. Um, and so that anxiety has to do with going too fast. And which is going too fast, the motorcycle or me, the adrenaline or the anxiety that I'm in, and the alertness that I have to put into it because I'm going far too fast in and out of traffic. Okay, so um, that will linger, but that's just an example of it, and I would generally call that anxiety. But I also put in the quality of hurry up because I spent much of my life in a hurry and didn't know it
Mhm.
until I got the concept from psychology from TA as one of the drivers, the hurry up driver. I said, they've got me nailed there. But it wasn't until years later with meditation that I was actually able to do something about it. And yet it has, let us say, lingered to the point, especially in the situation of needing to travel or to go someplace or to drive somewhere or to pick someone up at a location that I'm looking for someone, perhaps I don't know who they are. Uh, this is the kind of last vestiges, but knowing it and recognize, oh, there you are again. I see you. Okay. And by seeing it again and recognizing it, that over all of these years, it still comes up, but now it has no harmful effect because it's seen so easily. But in the beginning, learning how to look at it and seeing it rather than just merely at the conceptual level. So you're beyond now the conceptual level of and have the word for insecurity. But you can see how this little story that I told you is kind of the same thing. Feeling insecure, feeling that I've got to get into a hurry to get something done, else some disaster will befall, or don't know what. That's not part of the conversation. It's just, escaping such dreadful or woeful state.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the two things to do with this is, number one, to examine it as often as you can. And that as often as you can has to do then with sati. That you're going to start building up sati. You're going to get the attitude, I'm going to take care of this. This thing is no longer going to be the better of me. I'm going to handle this one.
Yeah.
And I'm going to remember to do it. I'm going to start watching for that stuff before it has a chance of doing the damage that I'll let it do if I don't stop it. Whatever that damage is, and it winds up, you feel bad. You start making decisions based upon fear rather than based upon the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
So we have to let that frontal cortex know that whether things are safe enough or not through wisdom. That you can't go by that gut feeling, because that gut feeling has been wired such that it goes off far too often.
Right. Yeah, I read a bit back in my old notebooks. I've been writing diaries since I'm 13 or so, and I noticed I was making like big plans and what I wanted to do in the future, and I haven't read it all, but I noticed often I didn't really have much emotional insight into what was driving my writing in that moment. And from that came a lot of like big plans and so on, while I didn't feel like I got to the core in hindsight now while reading that. And now I feel like my emotional awareness is starting off more. And first I thought, okay, that's some psychological defect that I have that prevents me from actually starting on the Buddhist investigation of deeper things. And now when I looked into Anapanasati, I thought there's this part about your first you start with the body and then your feelings, then some joy arises, and then there's this investigating your mental state or mental formations. I thought maybe that's also getting to know your emotions and the mental state that you're in. I'm not sure if that's
Precisely so. You just made the connection that's actually quite important. So let me stop and put that in. The word sita is the one that's used. The sita is often translated as the word mind, but the word mind should be better translated as manu. That sita is actually more of the emotional part of the mind, or even the heart, which we've now identified as the reptilian brain. Okay, so that part that is now wired so that it goes off too often, or that insecurity and fear arises in times that it's not appropriate for it to arise, becomes the habit of the child, that you were trained that way as a child, feeling that things were insecure. All right. But now intellectually, at least, you know that, oh no, you've got your life straightened out now, so that there's very little insecurities there. You're pretty well wired as far as securities. That in fact you did everything that you could to give this feeling of insecurity what it wanted and needed so that it would feel good. And here you are now in a very secure situation, and you still feel insecure. Ha ha. So in a way, it's a tool that you use that had some benefit, and it doesn't have any benefit anymore. Because by your direct wisdom and knowledge and seeing clearly, you can see that there is no real danger. Why do I feel so afraid if there's no reason? Or why am I in a hurry when there's no reason to be in a hurry? Because in a way, they're deeply related. They come out of the same thing. One is just a little bit different in behavior than the other. But other than that, it's all out of this deep sense of ill well-being that comes directly out of the instinctual mind that is called the self-preservation instinct. It's the strongest driver of all. And yours needs to be kicked in the butt. Wakey, wakey. Things are not as dangerous as you think. But we can also recognize that feeling of danger that drives our lives was what kept humanity alive during some pretty tough times. And so it's a survival instinct for the individual and for the species. And without it, we wouldn't have gotten here. But now that we're here, we can unpack that bag. We don't have to keep carrying that suitcase around with us anymore.
Yeah.
That our lives are secure now.
Does that fit into chain of dependent arising? Like it seems
Precisely
like
so. Precisely so.
because it seems like it starts with this feeling of something is wrong, and you start looking for, okay, what is wrong? Then you come up with all the reasons and you focus on these possible reasons for it.
All right. So in the way of Paticca Samuppada, we would say, at least Bhikkhu Buddhadasa would say, that wisdom at the point of contact. All right. So when the feeling of insecurity arises as a sensation or as a bodily piece of knowledge, it's still not yet the feeling. The feeling comes in is when you don't like it. And when you don't like it, that kicks off the mechanism of trying to figure out what to do to get rid of that feeling that you don't like. Okay, so in Bhikkhu Buddhadasa's world, what that means is that we want to start changing our relationship with that sensation. And the way that we do that is by, first off, recognize that we got to stop not liking it and start using it as a friend or a tool or something like that, even in the sense of, I see you. Thank you for tugging. And so in that regard, we become the champion of our own mind or the boss of our own mind. We become the emperor of our own pile of dirt rather than being buried under it, to where we're driven by and have the job to do to get rid of this feeling. Why is that? Because I don't like it. And so all I have to do is say, wait a minute, I don't care so much anymore. So now we can begin to see the truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off because you don't like the fact of this insecurity. That's why, in a way, you've been trying to ignore it or push it away, get rid of the feeling, by first off ignoring the feeling, but second off giving yourself a task to do that's supposed to get that thing quiet. And now you've done everything you need to do to get it quiet, and it still won't shut up. and you've mixed a little meditation in there, and finally you're waking up and you're seeing it. You're looking at it directly and you're saying, now I see what's running my life. But guess what? It runs almost everybody's life. Yours in your own unique way.
Yeah.
Your way, by the way, has a lot of similarities to it with Germany and Europe and that kind of thing. That is part of the society. The society has helped made you feel insecure. That you don't live in a secure society. People want security, but the history of that area of the world is quite insecure. And so the people who live through all of that have still those feelings of insecurity that came from a reality. But now that reality is over, but they still carry on those feelings, and they teach the younger kids how to feel that way when you've got no reason to. And so when you begin to see that stuff, every time it pops up, you can say, I got you. I can see that insecurity. And now I can take a deep breath and just either let it relax on its own or to snuggle up. Let's be friends with those feelings. Let's not be enemies with them. Just because I didn't like it doesn't mean I can't change my attitude. I mean, that's what the second item on the Eightfold Noble Path is all about, is let's change our attitude.
Yeah.
So instead of not liking it, we can say, okay, there you are. I see you.
I feel like I started noticing more recently how the different, like all these lists in Buddhism, I used to think of them more in concepts, or this something to be developed, and this, like the 7 factors of awakening, for example. And at some point you have these very developed, and that's very good then. And it's a bit, maybe not the standard way, but I smoked some weed with a housemate of mine recently. Then I had to go out, do something, and I could see more how my mind was like pulling me off in some direction and how I was cramping up, what that was doing with me. And I saw, I'm losing my centeredness or my control in a way in that moment. So I brought myself back. Oh, I see what's going on there. And then I thought, okay, what do I know? I know mindfulness, bringing myself back. I know joy. I know ease. I know equanimity. And I could see, oh, is that there right now or not? Or maybe I can bring that in. Maybe I can bring that in and some energy. And I realized that also what you said about anapanasati, like playing a piano, or maybe I can do that. And they all support each other then. Sometimes maybe it's hard to see what you're feeling, but it helps then to bring in some more energy or some more joy. And it will also make it easier to be aware of what's going on. And it brought it much more to life for me. That felt like quite insight just because it was practical and because I thought, oh, okay, that's a connection to actually my direct experience between all these lists that can be a bit abstract.
Right. These abstractions, another way of talking about it is each one of them seems to be a different concept or a different list of items. However, when we recognize Anapanasati's various aspects and all of these lists of things that are associated with it, we begin to understand that, wait a minute, these are just the detailed plans of the mind and the practice that can be summed up in just a couple of words. And that is dukkha, dukkha nirodha, which means see the suffering and step out of it.
Mm.
All right? Or see it coming and get out of its way. That's basically the whole package is just that. And that all of this breakdown of it is to put it into a particular context. But it seems within Theravada that the contextualizations have gone far too many, but that, oh no, these things actually existed in the time of the Buddha, but people kind of understood those things. And that they see that they're just being all put together. An example of that is how interconnected the 7 factors of enlightenment, the Sambhojana, is directly related to the Eightfold Noble Path, with item by item on the path when you recognize it correctly.
Okay, wait,
I
I
don't know
hear
how
you
long you've been
again.
gone. I've been talking for a while. You've been all frozen.
I still heard the last thing that the different lists and all is to put the basic dukkha, dukkha nirodha into context and to apply it to different
Right.
situations.
And that all of those various lists of things actually have a tremendous amount of overlap.
Hmm.
An example that I was using when you were frozen was the Sambhojana, the 7 factors of enlightenment, are mapped directly to items on the Eightfold Noble Path. And that sati is number 1 on the list of the Sambhojana, and then investigation is number 2. And then right effort, which becomes energy, is number 3 when it's there and available. And then piti, or joy, is then the mind state that one is in. So these are the 4 items on the Sambhojana, and you can see that, oh, that's right effort is the energy that comes, so that our effort becomes enjoyable to the point that it's no longer an effort, and that the piti is actually the outcome of the feeling really good because we're a winner. Because in the Sambhojana, this is the fulfillment, in fact, of the Eightfold Noble Path, that while we're walking the path, we're beginners or students or whatever. The Sambhojana is the factors of enlightenment, which means that these factors, when they're put together, is enlightenment. So when unremitting mindfulness, when the mindfulness is there over and over and over and over again, that's when it becomes an enlightenment factor. Until then, it's quite spotty. So we have to train it to get it up in gear, to keep coming back. With maybe the idea that, okay, the immediate goal is to be mindful, say, 100 times a day. What can I
The
do to be
immediate goal.
mindful? Pardon?
Sorry, that was just a bit hacked. The immediate goal is so and so a day.
100 times a day. Mindfulness 100 times a day. And that mindfulness at 100 times a day would be looking, for instance, for any insecurity. How do I feel right now? Let's do a little bit of investigation. Let's stop what we're doing and turn around and do an internal inventory with the idea of cleaning the mind. Let's take out the garbage and clean out the mind and be here now and enjoy the moment and up, 2, 3, 4, and take a deep breath and never mind, back to work. And we do that 100 times a day. And for you especially is take a good look at how do you feel security-wise? Do you feel secure in this moment or not? Take a look, take a breath, feel how you feel, and say, is there any insecurity here now?
Yeah.
So you begin to look for it.
When I find it, I just recognize it and let it go, breathe. Or
Well,
do I?
certainly don't attach to it. So letting it go on its own or letting it pass by is when we grab a hold of it and want to throw it out. That's when the trouble begins.
Hmm.
When we go along with I don't like it. The answer is you don't really know whether you like it or not. But now we're going to start looking for it, investigating it, find out what it is.
Hmm. Okay, I think that's where I might have gone wrong in the past, because I had the idea maybe I look at it, but mostly I try to gladden my mind, and that felt like sometimes I was trying to get rid of the unpleasant stuff by gladdening my mind.
Ah, yes, that's easy to see. That I wouldn't be against you gladdening the mind at all. But what we're also looking at is not gladdening the mind to get rid of it, but to gladdening the mind so that the mind is glad enough to accept it.
Hmm.
Gladdening the mind is not going to get rid of it. Gladdening the mind is just gladdening the mind. Hey, I see you. Just because there's insecurity there doesn't mean that, or how to say it, just because the body feels insecure doesn't mean that I feel insecure.
Hmm. Yeah. So there can be different parts next to each other. Is that something like that?
Well, ownership, let us say it like this. The ownership is there whether we like it or not. If we have no feeling about it, because it's, let us say, beyond our skill level. And that as you get a higher skill level, you'll begin to discover things that you didn't discover before because your skill level wasn't up to seeing those things. So now your skill level is up to scratch for seeing insecurity. And so what you want to start doing now is actually actively going to look for it. Because if you actively go looking for it, then it'll probably be caught when it's at a far less severe degree than in when it slaps you with and say, "Here I am." You can see it in its smaller states.
Yeah.
So actively go looking for it on a regular basis, kind of all day long or anytime you remember to. And start doing it on a regular, often basis. Just basically take a deep breath. And as you're taking a deep breath, you can actually feel like that whatever tensions, anxieties, insecurities there are being chased out with this breath. And so now, as I'm taking a deep sigh at the end of that out breath, I can just check, yeah, there's nothing here.
Yeah.
Everything is hunky dory. I feel good.
And if I just focus on that, don't I limit myself and maybe not see other things that I could be?
Oh no, this investigation is to be there for everything. And I know exactly what you're talking about. The way that I would talk about it, you've heard the game of whack-a-mole?
Mm.
Okay. So imagine that you've got one whack-a-mole that keeps coming up very often. And because it's there so often, the kid begins to just work on that hole.
Yeah.
And so every time that whack-a-mole comes up in that hole, he's going to hit it, but he may miss quite a the other holes because he's focused too much on that hole.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what. Yeah.
So that's the way that we look at it. That in fact, this sati is an awakening, which is an opening, which is a spreading out of our investigative skill, in the sense of opening the mind and let it becoming enormous, expansive, so that we feel all the kinds of feelings that there are. But in this case, we also put at the top of the checklist, is there any insecurity in there? Not like that's the only item on the list. No, the list is so long it's not even a list. It's just everything is there. But we put this one at the top of the list.
Right. Yeah.
And so taking that deep breath and coming back, and then after we get the mind in a really good state, is when we want to sustain it in that good state by having mostly wholesome thoughts. And so we're going to throw out any thoughts that would bring in, for instance, any anxiety or any insecurities. So thoughts about, for instance, work, or thoughts about school, or thoughts about bad things that happened, all of those kind of thoughts, no, out. Get the whole past out, in fact. We can get the whole past out and the whole future out. Then the wholesome thoughts will be mostly about what's happening right now, especially in regard to the Eightfold Noble Path and the Four Noble Truths.
What would be wholesome thoughts about the now?
Pardon?
What would be wholesome thoughts about the now? Like I
Is
could
this
think.
suffering? Is this freedom from suffering? Is there any anxiety or any insecurity there? Or is there not? That's first noble truth and third noble truth, right there. That investigation is actually practicing the path.
So wholesome thoughts. A big thing is investigation.
Look at what you're doing. Begin to enjoy this present moment. As a winner, as the lion. And in this case, the lion is free from insecurity. He's a secure lion. And so we want to get into that state and maintain it. The secure lion winner's posture.
Yeah.
And you can do that by watching. Look closely now and look often.
Yeah. I feel in a better place to do that now than still a while ago. Like I understand it better. I was wondering for the retreat, because I want to be very clear that I understand the instructions, and they do quite much. Well, first, anapanasati, mostly to make your perceptiveness, physical perceptiveness stronger, and then the body scan, and how that fits together with what we're talking about, which is also much about keeping the hindrances out and investigation also of mental states, while Goenka focuses so much on the body. And I don't want there to be or I want there to be as little as possible conflict in my head to what how to practice during the retreats.
All right. Okay. Thanks. That's a really, really good question, by the way. Here's the way that I would answer that is first off by saying that Goenka's retreats, in a way, suffer from the same situation as every retreat does. And that is in the sense that they've gone to have new students. That most of the time, people who are doing a Goenka retreat have never done a Goenka retreat before. Most of the students are not repeat. That's not true in every retreat center. Thailand is one of the places that's a clear counterexample to where there's an old ladies clique club that do nearly every Goenka retreat as a group. But they also invade Watsu and Mok and come down here and do retreats too. So there's an old ladies groupie retreat club. It's got hundreds of people in it. But never mind, I digress. Back to Goenka's retreat. They are geared then for the beginners, to where the way that I teach is much more the natural method in the sense of, let me just dump this whole pile on you and see how well you climb to the top of it. And that, so that what we're doing in some cases is far more advanced than what you would expect to talk about, especially with a beginner. So you're walking in there with advanced knowledge that the ordinary people who do the Goenka retreats don't have. And so everything that Goenka says is probably true, but it's designed to get students focused on sati. That even though they just call it anapana, really the focus is on anapanasati. And that the body scan is also merely step 3 of anapanasati. But what he fails to focus on is the quality of the breath. They don't talk too much about how to breathe, but rather merely watching the breath, to where there is a much more important point, and that is just the deep breaths. So that's an additional thing that you can practice on top of whatever they're saying to make sure that your breathing is more deep than usual so that you can get your mind fit for work.
I mean, I really like their retreat setting that they create, but it also brings me in a bit of a tight spot because they actually advise you, for example, or they tell you just natural breath. Instead, when you're gone, then sometimes you may do like 3 very deep breaths, but otherwise you shouldn't do that. And they're
That's a
also
very
quite strict.
common,
I mean,
that's a very, right, okay.
and you should just
Those first
follow
2 or
their
3 deep breaths should be done with every point of sati. It is okay to go back to normal breathing, but we need to get, every time that we remember, is take 2 or 3 deep breaths to get the mind going again.
Sorry, someone just walked in. So with every time you are going back to sati, that you take 3 or a couple deep breaths.
Yes, that's what I would recommend.
What my thing is with them is that they're so strict about, like, you should really just do their practice, and if they hear
I
that you're
know.
doing anything
I know
else,
why.
they get kind
I've
of
been
pissed.
there and done that. Okay, there is a reason for everything. Every silly rule has a good reason behind it. And in India, when Goenka first started teaching their retreats, people that had basic Hindu stuff would be bringing their trinkets, bringing their pujas, saying their mantras, and doing all kinds of things. And it was a pretty rowdy mess. And so he had to start enforcing rules in the sense of being strict about it. You got to follow the rules, or you got to do the practice that we recommend here.
Hmm.
And they don't like it a lot that I know more about what Goenka teaches than they do. Because all they've had is Goenka, but I've had Goenka plus sutras plus Bhikkhu Buddhadasa plus a whole lot of other stuff. And I mix it all together and pour in at least a ton of psychology. and out pops a different view of things than their limited view. And that's the first thing. The second one is that they do not have a clue about step 10 of Anapanasati, about gladdening the mind.
Hmm.
But Goenka hints at it. He hints at it when he says, never mind, start again. When he says that, I just want to bust right out laughing. Never mind is what he's saying. It doesn't matter what's in the mind. Don't get glum about it. Just start again. Well, that's just exactly the same phrase as look at what you're doing, or even, aha, I caught you. Aha, I caught you is precisely a different way of saying what Goenka says, which is never mind, start again. But with the one that I'm using, it has more of the quality to emphasize the joy building,
Hmm.
to gladden the mind, to bring it up to fitness. So when you add good breathing and gladdening the mind, that's what's put you in gear for developing rapture or piti and sukha or pleasure. And the sukha in this regard, which is step 7 of Anapanasati, 4, 5, 6, step 6 of Anapanasati, sukha, is there just the opposite of dukkha. That first jhana is free from dukkha. Why? Because we have a state of satisfaction.
Hmm.
And yet so many people do a Goenka retreat and they never find any satisfaction in there. And so they start to work hard.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
be careful about following exactly their rules, because their rule following too closely will lead you astray. And so keep those two things in mind. One is you got to breathe, and two, you got to gladden the mind. I see you, which is what Goenka is actually saying, but it's kind of cloudy in mysticism and that kind of stuff of never mind, start again.
Hmm.
That's what he says. Never mind, start again. Well, that's exactly what we're saying. That never mind is wakey wakey. Let's have some mindfulness here. Let's wake up.
Hmm.
And so I would heartily recommend anybody to go to a Goenka retreat. If your
Um,
only option is to not do a retreat.
hmm.
So if you've
um,
got a retreat around someplace and you can go for it, I would highly recommend that. But don't get yourself into the state of feeling insecure about the differences with what I'm telling you and what they say. Because if you do, I can just howl with laughter and say, "Ha, got ya!" Did you hear what I said? Don't put
got
yourself into a state of insecurity about whether you're going to follow their rules or mine.
Yeah, I mean, I was already last time or last two times quite unsure because they talk a lot about, well, I can understand you just scan or do whatever you do, and when you get distracted or there's gross or painful sensations, you just stay with that. You don't react to it strongly. That makes sense. But then they talk about sankharas and these inner knots, and which are resolved over time, and that felt much more like I gotta have faith that something like that exists and it can just be
Actually,
resolved
the
by
insecurity that you're talking about is one of those sankharas. But there are sankharas in the body. Oh, what a lie? know that one. Okay. All right. Enjoy. They're going to the what? Going to the temple. I don't know why. Oh. She said Pai Tiao, which means she's going to play. And I would rather her think of the temples in Thailand as a place to go and play, as opposed to any religious stuff that they put on them. I mean, that's exactly the right reason to go to a temple. Go play.
And yeah, I believe that there's stuff and like knots from the past that like, I mean, that's not even belief, that's quite obvious, but that their way to deal with it is just the body scan and resolving gross distractions through a lot of detailed attention to the body or distractions.
But they're not mentioning it directly. But in order to do it that way, they're not saying something that has to happen. And that is that we get over feeling bad about the stuff that comes up. To stop feeling bad about it. So they've got it at least half right.
And the stuff that comes up, you mean just body things
In
or
whatever
also...
it is, including insecurity. That whatever it is that comes up, be there with it. Don't hate it. Don't dislike it. And that's true about body sensations. Because Goenka is a really big one on getting the body cleaned out in the sense of knowing the distinction between the sensations of the body and pain. That another way of looking at it is, I am not the body. So anatta, that the body is anatta. There's no self in the body. It's not me that's in the body. Therefore, when the body has sensations, it's the body's having sensations. If I call it pain, then it's because I'm in pain. But if I can leave the bodily sensations as merely bodily sensations, then I'm not in pain. In fact, I'm the strong lion here. I can handle that. If I can handle that little old sensation, I can handle any sensation. That's the direction they're pointing to, but they don't quite understand it. But I think that it's an unspoken point. So let me describe that again to you. And that is, whatever sensation that comes up is not my sensation or my pain. It's merely the body's sensation. Therefore, I can do this process and do not make the body me over and over again, which means now I have the confidence that no matter how or what sensations or sankharas come into the body, I can still clean the mind out and come back to this present moment and do so joyfully as the winner. That I can drop being a victim of the sankharas of the body. That's part of the reason why Goenka has them sit like that, is to bring up some of those sankharas so that he can begin to deal with it. With the idea at the end of the retreat, hey, if I could get through that retreat and I can do that, I can do that kind of stuff my whole life.
And insecurity then also has a mental component, right? But they ask you to just focus on the body. How does that? Yeah.
Yes. All right. So do what they're saying to do now and at least get that much done. That in fact, it's kind of hard to do one without the other. In a way, by working only with the body, but how or with what are you working with the body? The answer is the mind. So you can't even work. In fact, the body is the easier way to do it. Because often emotions are subtle. hard to find, hard to pin down, mental. But the stuff in the body is easy to work with. There it is. It's a sensation. It's the kind of thing that most people, if they're not mindful, will call a pain. I hope they supply the place with mosquitoes. It's important to have mosquitoes at Goenka retreats.
Thank God it's winter. In the summer, we do have them.
I'm teasing right now, but you get the gist of it. That's what the retreat is all about, is let's get in touch with this breathing machine that we inhabit. Because it's not me. It's just a breathing machine that's inhabited. Go pay close attention to it. Learn to sit up straight so the back doesn't hurt. But breathe deeply on a regular basis. Every time you can remember, at least do about 1, 2, or 3 deep breaths, and then go back to normal. They won't argue with you on that one.
And is it possible to get to know, for example, our topic, insecurity and other feelings, get to know them better and like resolve them just through body scanning? Or maybe that's not the goal.
Yes, on both counts. However, don't underestimate the value of the body scan. That it has enormous value.
So you're saying it is possible to recognize and resolve them, and also don't underestimate the value of the body scan?
Well, no, I'm saying is that, and there is more to do.
Okay.
That there is more dukkha than coming just from the body. However, that's the major source, like the number one source. And that in fact, insecurity generally is so big that it winds up having a body component also. It's not just mental. So let's work on the bodily part and get that one finished off so that you don't, you like what you see, and what you don't see yet. You don't know. So working with the body is a very good way to start. It's not against the teaching of the Buddha at all.
How do I know if there's something else to do, or is that just, maybe it's just you understand that there's something else?
Let me ask you this. Right as the time when you started to formulate and ask that question, did you recognize any insecurity inside? Is there anything else I need to do? Was your question.
Yeah, I guess it feels like still a beginner. There's still stuff I don't understand. I want to know where it leads, what's coming up.
Guess what? When you get there, you'll have new questions about where it leads from there. Until you start enjoying the journey and stop asking for results. Let it become a process. You've been result oriented for so long. There's no result. You're not going to get any result out of a Goenka retreat. No results. Maybe some improvement, in a lot of different areas. Some of them spectacular, but no results.
No, what is the difference between improvements and results then?
Well, result is that when we finally gotten it, we've got the big prize, we've done it, and nothing is like that. Everything is a process. But asking what the result is, or asking, well, what do I do next? Okay, I understand what you're talking about now, and I'll go practice that. But then what happens? The answer is, well, we'll find out, won't we?
Yeah, I tend to want to grasp, like, because
You feel insecure not knowing. Is that right?
yeah, and I want to avoid all these unpleasant states as much as possible.
Well, everybody has the idea, the more I know, the better I feel. And that simply is not the case. The more I know, the better I feel is the movement behind it. And look what all I know. I know so much. I know too much. I know far too much. But I try to keep track of what's good for me instead of knowing all of the stuff that I know is unhealthy. All right. So in our lifetimes, we spent a whole lot of time finding things that were wholesome and unwholesome. Now it's time to start putting out the difference between what is wholesome and what is not wholesome, so we spend more time in the wholesome and less time in the unwholesome. And so this is the practice. And so going to the Goenka retreat is exactly an invitation to do that, regardless of the individual instructions. But to be able to begin to manage the feelings about I like it, I don't like it. And so being there with the body and paying attention to the body and watching what's happening with the body, but not making judgments about the body, that is such an important lesson for students to learn. It's possibly number one lesson. If they can't learn that one, they're not going to learn anything.
They can't.
I said, if they don't learn how to manage the body, if they can't manage the sensations in the body, then they won't be able to do that with mental pain. You see, the body has physical pain that at least we can look at, we can see it, we can talk about it. Now let's figure out whether we like it or not. And when we get over not liking it, now we're ready then to actually examine the deeper feelings that are all mental.
Yeah, I don't even know how just mental feelings would look like.
All right. Well, whatever comes up, that's a part of the natural method. That what comes up for you is important. So while you're in the retreat from time to time, think about what's happening in that retreat is what's important relative to what you want to talk to me about. What's worthy of you doing this retreat? What is the very wholesome things that happen to you? What are your insights? What's going on? Etc. like that. How's that insecurity thing going for you? These are the kind of questions that we can talk about when you come out of the retreat in a couple of weeks.
Yes, so as sort of a benchmark, asking, for example, insecurity, but also what are valuable lessons or mental factors that are coming up that are developing or
That'll be good.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
All right. Well, we'll see you right after the retreat.
Yes.
And the last thing I can say is take a deep breath and enjoy it. Do that at least, well, since you're in a retreat, do that about 300 times a day. Relax, take a deep breath, and enjoy it. Have a smile.
Well, thank you very much again. It was really nice to see you again.
I really enjoyed it. Okay, well, we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, see you then. Bye bye.
Okay, bye-bye.